Trustees is hereby called to order at 7:03 p.m. I'm very pleased that you have taken the time to join us this evening. As the Judson Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals and policies and oversee the management of the district. We are responsible for approving budgets, contracts, personnel appointments, and to listen to reports from the superintendent. We are not here to make administrative or management decisions pertaining to the daily operations of the district. This is the responsibility of the superintendent. In compliance with the State Government Code on open meetings, tonight's agenda has been appropriately posted. This is a meeting in public, not a meeting of the public. As our guest, you are welcome to observe and listen. These proceedings are being video and audio recorded and will become part of the Judson permanent legal record. In order that the tape adequately reflects these proceedings, please silence your mobile phones and refrain from talking while others are speaking. Since it is legally mandated that these proceedings are recorded accurately, I may have to ask for order periodically should I notice that disruptions are interfering with our recording capabilities. Again, thank you for being here and for your interest in the Judson Independent School District. The subjects to be discussed or considered or upon which any formal action will take place are listed in the agenda. Items do not have to be taken in the same order as shown in the meeting notice. Right now, I'd like to establish quorum. My left, Mr. LaFoyle.
Here.
Mr. Merrill.
Here.
Mr. Salinas.
Here, and thank everybody for being here tonight.
Ms. Adair.
Present. Thank you for coming, and please excuse my absence on last month. My son graduated from college.
All right. I'm Gilbert Flores. I want to just say that Steve Stallier had called me today, and he's having some issues with his dad, so he couldn't be here today. So that's why I'm sitting in here. We have Dr. Mackey.
Present.
All right. You want to introduce your staff, Doctor?
Mr. Fields, Mr. Elizondo, Ms. Ferries, interim, HR, Ms. Barra, and Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. Having established a quorum, please stand for the invocation and then the posting of the colors. Dr. Mackey.
Would you please bow your heads, open your heart. Father, once again we meet and do business for this district. We want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to arrive here safely. Lord, we want to thank you for the conduct of this meeting and the things that we're going to do for the best interest of our kids, our district, our community. Thank you, Lord, for everything you've blessed us with. Thank you for our troops to keep us from harm's way. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I'd like to introduce to you our pledge leader for tonight. He is Javier Torres. Javier, why don't you come on up here to the microphone? Javier is 10 years old and is in the 4th grade at Candlewood Elementary School. Javier is an outstanding student and positive role model that demonstrates leadership qualities. He is a student of the TAG program, the Talented and Gifted program, is currently an A honor roll student and is on the School Safety Patrol program. Javier excels in academics, but also athletics. He's a part of the elite baseball team that plays year-round, and this past July, his baseball team had the opportunity to participate in the USSA Summer World Series in Dallas, Texas. Let's join Javier in the Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. and Texas flags.
I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
You may be seated. Let's give Javier a nice hand for a good job. And Javier, can you come back up here so we can take a picture with the board there? You might want to shake some hands there as well. And while they're doing that, to take the picture here, I'd like to also recognize Javier's parents, Vanessa and Javier Torres. Could you stand just for a moment, please? Parents, did you get a picture there? Okay, all right, thank you. I'd also like to recognize the color guard for tonight, Judson High School Junior ROTC, Cadet Senior Airman Jaliyah Tab, Cadet Airman First Class Bethany Ague, Cadet Airman Basic Taylor Andrews, and Cadet Airman Basic Adriana Rodriguez. We have one. Now, our board recognition for this evening comes from two of our elementary schools. The counseling staff at these schools are recognized by the Texas School Counselor Association. That group recognizes outstanding counseling efforts through what is called the CREST Awards. That stands for Counselors Reinforcing Excellence for Students in Texas. The counseling staffs at these two schools showed significant evidence in improving the lives and achievements with students in their academic, career, and social pursuits. They were two of only 40 chosen from across the state. We'd like to say congratulations, and you'll come on up here. First of all, Misty Arnales of Park Village Elementary. And we'd also like to recognize Kirsten Heddes from Pashal Elementary School. And also making contributions to these counseling efforts are social workers Miosha Hawkins of Park Village and Cecilia Alvarez of Pashal Elementary School. And we'll take a picture, I guess, with these four here. While they're doing that, they earned these awards based on 7 criteria: principal support, the School Counseling Advisory Council, school climate and safety, student results, major achievements, community partnerships and resources, and parent collaboration. I'd also like to recognize Park Village Principal Marcia Bellinger and Pashal Principal Anthony Willard. and also a proud director who is taking a picture right now, Mr. Ernest Cox. He is the guiding force of the JISD Director of Guidance and Counseling. I might also mention just real quickly that Judson High School counseling staff and Judson Middle School staff were also finalists in that particular selection, so they are doing a great job as well. And those are the recognitions for this evening.
Please let the record reflect that Mr. Macias has joined us. Thank you. At this time, we want to do item 3, an acknowledgement of visitors and citizens to be heard. I know we have Councilwoman Renee Pashal from Converse City of Converse will do. We got Mayor Al Suarez from the same elementary? No. Are there any other elected officials here? I'm sorry, I didn't see them. Oh, and you are, sir, please?
Kevin Hanna, City of Selma.
Okay, thank you for being here, Mr. Haas. Okay. Now we have citizens to be heard. The board is interested in the concerns and comments relating to our district by our citizens, and therefore provides the opportunity to address us at regular board meetings. You may speak for 3 minutes, once only per meeting, please. There are no delegations here, there's individuals. The first one to speak is Mayor Al Suarez.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. I'll try to make as fast as I can. I used to having a 3-minute time limit, but thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for their service. Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Mackey, staff members, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm here this evening in support of item 5A to ask for your support. 7.7 acres of land swap between Judson ISD and City of Converse has been vacant for many years. In exchange for a stormwater detention fee of $46,000 for the Converse to Copperfield Elementary School, and also to add a $71,000 credit fee so you guys could use it for anything to include paying the water as well. And speaking of water, the City of Converse is getting ready to possibly lift the water restrictions at the next council meeting. So you will be able to water Copperfield Elementary. It's much needed. But what we're looking at possibly is building an animal control facility that's much needed in Converse at this time at the space. So this is a continuation of a long partnership that we've had since 2007. So I became mayor. Give you some of the examples. The partnership we have when we built Judson High School, the road work, the expansion from 2 to 5 lanes, and the water detention project that was very costly for Judson, that we partner up and help finance as well, working together. I remember calling Dr. Mackey on that on the phone and dealing with that. And that just goes the way that we try to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, working together because we both serve the same taxpayers. And this is a continuation of the same thing. We're just trying to divert tax money to the best possible uses by working together. So we appreciate favorable consideration this evening on item 5A, and I'll be here to answer any questions. And so I also brought the Converse City Manager, Mr. Lanny Lambert, to answer any questions. And thank you all for what you do to educate and give our kids quality education. Thank you.
Next to speak is Renee A. Pashal, 409 Bridget Drive. General comments.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, board, staff, and community. Hi, Mr. Kirschman. I'm glad that the mayor spoke on partnerships. That's what I wanted to talk about this evening. Very briefly, there was a time, I guess about 2-3 months ago, Mr. Kirshner, you came to Converse City Council meeting and appealed to us about a need that the district has, and it's also a need that the city of Converse has. And in the line of talking about partnerships, I'd like to further discuss a partnership that may be something to recommend in the future, possibly in the very near future, and that would be a natatorium. The swim students still do not have a place in this district to swim, so they have to go elsewhere. And I am appealing to you that we can, again, talk about possibly a partnership and what we can do and make a plan for the pool that is in Converse. It's a money pit for us, but you all need to have a pool for your swim students. And so I'd like to recommend that we have some courageous discussions about a natatorium. Thank you very much. I'd like to see us continue to bring synergy to the city of Converse, to the school district, and our surrounding area. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see here. He's here, he has to go to Dallas. Where's his number? Is he in discussion? Okay. At this time, I want to move an item up for a discussion item from our demographic person, item 6B. We're going to hear now. He has to get back to Dallas tonight. Well, it's a discussion. Discuss the annual demographic report. Discussion.
This
interview is Lockheed partner.
Yes.
And he'll be giving out the presentation this evening.
Dr. Mackey, thank you, Board. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I do appreciate you moving me forward there, and I will be able to get back on the road, in a timely manner. It's a pleasure to be in Judson ISD again. I think that this is our second or third year, I think. It's been a pleasure working with Mr. Kirshner. I'm going to run through this report fairly quick, but feel free to back me up, stop me, ask questions wherever you want. I think I can back things up pretty well. So when we begin to do an enrollment report and a demographic study, we try to look at everything. We try to look at everything from the national and regional economy. Then we zero in on the school district itself. We work with about 50 school districts each year, all in Texas. So we're pretty familiar, with the Texas economy and what's going on in Texas. And you'd have to be, I guess, hiding under a bush to not know that right now the Texas economy is pretty strong. You can see unemployment rates in Bexar County, San Antonio are now below 5%. 5% is generally considered full employment. Typically, when you're trying to attract new employers, they want to know that there's a labor force. So they like to see unemployment rates right around 5%. So we've got really strong unemployment rates. Job growth in the last year in San Antonio, they've added 23,700 jobs. You see there nationally, the San Antonio area is 6th in the nation in percent growth of new jobs. So we're adding jobs in San Antonio from a percentage point faster than New York City and Los Angeles. And you can see there that 4 of the top 6 there are in Texas. From a single-family permits in the metropolitan, am I correct? Are you guys looking at the same thing I'm looking at? Right? You guys have it in front of you as well. Okay. San Antonio has 6,038 single-family permits from August to August. So just over 6,000. You can see there where San Antonio ranks with some other metropolitan statistical areas. That's what MSA stands for in the area, in the region. In San Antonio itself, the housing market, year-to-date sales are up 4%. Average price, median price, listings are all up. Days in the market is down. Existing home inventory is down. So this kind of does two things. Number one, this is what drives up the value, having that down. So this kind of creates the seller's market that we're in the middle of as well. But also with that days in the market and existing home inventory down, it also gives builders confidence to build new housing. And you've certainly seen that in Judson. If we look at new homes, annual starts and closing, a closing is an occupied home. So just, they're trending very tight there, 8,500, starts, 8,200 closing. That's a very strong, tight window. If you look back a few years, back in 2009, you can see where closings were very high and starts were low. That's when we were coming out of we were working off inventory that had been built up during the recession. So things are now cranked back up, and they're probably going to stick right around that 8,500 mark. We're not going to get much higher than that. I think back when they were building close to 10,000 homes in San Antonio, that turned out to be a little bit unhealthy. And so now builders are kind of learning from that and kind of watching things. If you look at enrollment change throughout the state, so ISD enrollment, last year about 76,085 new students were enrolled in Texas schools. That was down slightly from the previous year of 77,000. You can see that we floated right around that 75, 78,000 number. We did peak up at 120 back in 05, 06, but you might remember that was a Katrina Rita year. So that was kind of an inflated number. We saw a slight decline this year, and what we saw in that decline is throughout the state of Texas, kindergarten enrollment declined. We certainly saw that in Judson. We saw that in many school districts where now we're kind of 5 years beyond that recession, and there was a bit of a hiccup, if you will. Persons decided not to have children during the recession, whether it was because of financial instability, whatever that might be, and that's now beginning to show itself five years later. Enrollment trends right here in your region, Judson, you can see there, added 1,671 students in the last 5 years. Only 3 other districts added more, and really number 5 there is almost 700 students behind Eagle Pass. So Judson, Southwest, Northeast, and North Side by far added more students in the region than anywhere else. You almost can't see Judson on that because it's right on the edge, but I'm sure that because you guys live here, you know exactly where you're at. But the darker the color, the more the growth. And if we look at this by sheer numbers, this is through the third quarter of 2014. So think of January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, right? The end of September was the end of the third quarter. The reason we use that for your enrollment projections is because that's also about when school was started. So these are the homes, these 608 homes that closed are the homes that generated a lot of your new growth in Judson ISD. So it came from the new housing and then regeneration or continued yield increases in existing housing. So this is where your last year's growth came from. VDL are vacant developed lots. So these are lots that are on the ground and builders can start building tomorrow. So you can see there's 1,000 lots that are ready. And so this year's pace could continue for one more year. And then you've got almost 7,000 future lots. Now these future lots are raw land. So this is where builders are going to be challenged in the next few years is we've got about 1.5 years supply of vacant developed lots, but in order to keep growing and moving forward, these future lots are going to have to be delivered. And that's kind of what we're watching now. Was that me that beeped? Is my time up? I tried. Okay. I had to take a shot. So if we look at quarterly in Judson, this is very interesting. Last quarter, in the third quarter, 193 homes were started, 210 homes closed. That's the most closings in one quarter that Judson ISD has ever seen. We got to 209 back in 2010. Very strong closing rates, kind of catching up. And what that means is and you can see this green line here. This green line is what we call inventory. And that green line represents homes that are either under construction or finished vacant. You can see the third quarter when closings spiked, the green line went down, which means builders are working off existing inventory. So that's a very healthy sign because you don't want your inventory to accelerate so much because that's when you start run into trouble. So right now it's a very healthy market. And your 2014 will likely end close to 700 starts, and that will be a number that you've never seen before in Judson ISD. Where's some of the growth going on? I've kind of got this is kind of a yesterday, today, and tomorrow, 3 slides, but these are your top 10 subdivisions that we're tracking in new home closings. So this is where the growth occurred in the last 12 months. So this is history. So this is what brought in your 2014-15 enrollment. You can see that Wortham Oaks, it led with 112 closings, followed by Northeast Crossing. So you can see the bigger the dot, the more closings that you see. You can see the locations too. Now, if we want to look at where the next round of growth, where the next 1 and 2 years is going to come from, these are where your vacant developed lots. Some of the same areas, some a little bit different areas, but you can see that there's Horizon Point's got 150 vacant developed lots, and they have 899 futures. So as they finish, they're going to want to deliver lots to keep pace. You can see where that growth might be. And then we have futures. This is where your futures, and some of these that you saw in all 3 charts, because there's very active developments, they've got ongoing vacant developed lots, and then they got future lots that will be delivered. Now I'm going to run through some slides that actually just give you an idea of where some of the growth is occurring and some snapshots. We've got a very solid research team at Timpson Demographics, and what they do is they reach out to developers, builders, the city. They talk to as many people as they can, just try to learn as much as they can about development, and then they try to give me some snapshots so that I can sit up here and talk about it a little bit. So this is not I'm not trying to show every place where there's development. I'm just showing where some of the bigger developments are. And what's happened here? Okay, so this is up in the north. Wortham Oaks, 1,500 total lots, 920 futures. You can see there. This development here right now. There's just a few students out there right now, but that yield will increase. In Diablo Canyons, there's 770 total lots. There's also the multifamily. There's some luxury apartments. We've actually got about 60 students that we've got geocoded up here, in this multifamily area up here.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
When you look at the futures, how far out would you say you're projecting?
Are you talking about are you talking about the future lot development?
Future growth there. I mean, as far as
our projections go out 10 years. Now, and we base those projections on housing that we know about now, and we have to make some judgments. When you get the vacant developed lots that we were looking at before, there were 1,000 of those, and then you got your future lots. We have to make some assumptions that they're going to deliver those future lots in time to keep pace of generating 600 to 800 homes a year. And we can, and there's obviously enough at 600 homes a year times 10, that'd be 6,000. So you've got enough future inventory out there already to sustain 10 years growth. Now we know that there's inevitably going to be a hiccup. I mean, generally the economy faces a recession historically around about every 7 years. So we're going to see some hiccups, and beyond the 3rd year is where we get challenged in enrollment projections. But as long as they can still deliver lots, then you can see some of the growth trends that we're going to show you later.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yep.
Thank you. So just some other developments. Creekside Gardens, there's 67 total lots, 17 of them are occupied. There's already 14 students there, so that's going to be a pretty high yielding development, Creekside Gardens. Then you've also got some future multifamily of 300 units, and you're liable to get about 50 students out of that development as well. If we look Creekside Ridge, there's 93 lots, 20 acres. They've got future phases, and the groundbreaking and the groundwork is underway. We've got, I think, there'll be probably 45 students that come out of that development. Our Arbors at Centerbrook, this is a future apartment complex that was approved by the state. This is low income units, so this is 80 units. Your lower income multifamily is generally going to yield some pretty high number of students. You could get close to a student per unit. At least you may end up with 60 students that come out of this 80 unit development.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
On the multifamily unit that's there that's projected by Creekside Gardens, how many students do you project come out of those multifamily?
That was the one with 300 units.
Yeah.
I think that one that type, it's like a market rate, what we call a market rate apartment. So that's probably going to yield about 2 students for every 10 units. Okay, so if you could look at 50 students, possibly 50 to 60 students, and about 50% of those are usually at apartments a little higher than that. 60% would be elementary. And And then, your subsidized or your low-income units are going to be more apt to be a much higher yield. Those are going to yield closer to 0.7 and 0.8 because they typically have a lot more students. So we base our projections on the type of complexes. We kind of break it into three categories. You have a subsidized and then you have a market rate apartment, and then oftentimes we see the luxury apartments. And those typically yield a lot less students because they're kind of a lifestyle choice. But in some areas, when you're in the middle of a fast growth time and homes are being built, they also kind of become transitional, and that's when you see a few more students, and that those yields have increased a little bit. Which one? The 300 that was back here, I think. I think it's. I don't know. Did I back that up or did I go the other one? Oh well, that's me. Oh, these multifamily here. This one was approved in October 2014. That one with 300 lots. So it was just approved in October. So they could get the groundwork going now. It could be open maybe by the start of next school year, but you're not going to see a lot of student impacts that first year though. It's going to gradually increase in year.
Did I get you back far enough?
I don't know if you did. How'd you do that?
Get this right here. There you go.
I'm going to back up one more here. Okay. No, two more. This is the one you're referring to, right? Okay. I said I could back it up, and then I couldn't, so I'm sorry. Yeah, so now I'm going to go forward again. Remington Place, I'm sorry?
So would you say on the ones when you have the approved date, on the apartment complexes, they open about a year after they're approved?
Well, construction is challenged right now because there's so much construction going on, so they could build, if they were improved in October, they can pour, by late next summer, they could have a building done. It's just, right now that it's a bit of a challenge because it's a labor force challenge, material challenge, so it could be a little bit longer than that. It could be an 18-month window. You might not see till next Christmas, before you see that apartment really leasing up. Here's some other future subdivision down here. There's been a concept plan underway of 278 future lots. They hope to have groundwork started in 12 to 18 months. A future development, as a rule of thumb, if you're thinking about apartments and single family as well, from the time they first start raw land, from the time they first start moving dirt until the first home is complete, is about a 2-year window, which is kind of gives you time to plan. So when you see a tractor plowing over the first tree, I guess they might not plow over trees, but if they do, once they begin that until they get the house built, it's generally about a 2-year window before they can get the roads, infrastructure, and homes going. So it does give you some planning time. Here's another one, the Heights at Converse. This is a little 200 market rate apartment units. This was not approved by the city of Converse yet. Is that right? Good. That's close. So that was Miller's Point. We've got a manufactured home community here. You always get high yields out of these communities. I think Summit Ridge right now has 100. No, that's a different one. Sorry, it's a loud microphone right there. There's currently 167 students in this development right now, and so those are going to continue to yield a lot of students as they build more homes or in those manufactured housing there. Copperfield Elementary, again, this is the Meadows of Copperfield. 600 of these are already occupied. There's 361 students there, but you're probably going to get another 100 students, 115 students out of this development as it builds out. KB Homes is very consistent, and they move pretty quick. And of course, Winfield, 500 total lots, 100 futures. You're seeing probably it's going to yield about 0.8 when it's done because it's been a very high yielding development. I think there's about 260 students there now in those 330 homes, so pretty high yielding development as well. And this is a development, the Northeast Crossing, that we're shared with Northeast ISD. We've tried as best we could to use the plats and break this up by not only, it's in 2 elementary zones and 2 school districts. So our team has tried to go in and break the numbers up according to where the development is occurring. So you can see that the Hartman Elementary, there's 666 total lots. Park Village, there's a fewer lots, 374. But most of your future lots is in Park Village, but there are some as well in Hartman. Okay, so so before I move on too much, that's the housing development that we're tracking. We're trying to understand, and we're trying to turn that now into enrollment projections. We also look at your current yields. We see what's coming out of the neighborhoods currently, where your growth is coming from, how those yields might be changing or not changing. We're looking at trends. Again, you can see that last year your kindergarten dropped from 1769 to 1726. That was something that we saw statewide. And, you know, birth rates 5 years ago declined. They declined for a couple years. We've actually held your kindergarten class, you'll see on the next slide, a little bit flat. We're growing it a little bit. At some point, your new growth outpaces the lack of existing birth rates. So there is a change there. What you can see in this cohort analysis here, these are your what we would call a survival rate. How many first graders become second graders, for instance? You know, there were 1,902 first graders in 13-14. They became 1,865 second graders. So that was a cohort change of 1.029. That was almost a 3% growth from first to second grade. So anything below 1 is a negative growth, which means you lost students. You have less say if that happened from in second grade, let's say that you declined from 1912 to 1865. So I'm sorry, I used first grade and I should use second grade there. That 0.98, that means 98% of last year's first graders became second graders. So you did see some declines there. What we noticed at your high school, this was interesting, you saw a drop there, 0.69, that's a 70% survival rate in 12th grade, but your 11th grade is 1.08. What that kind of told me is that there was possibly some challenges with some graduation, but they were able to hold on to those students, and that which allowed that cohort to be positive. So this is kind of a good sign because together these cohorts, they're like 95% survival, which is much. Previously, you've been seeing about 92, 91 of your 11th, 12th grade combined. So whatever was done last year, it did really help your overall survival there. So that just kind of gives you a glimpse of what's been going on. And this next slide, this initial analysis, gives me a first glance of what next year could look like. There's 3 things. The first one never happens, but I like to show it. This is what I would call a roll-up. So this would mean if every second grader became a third grader. So if all 1,031 of these third graders became fourth graders, you would add 640 students. If next year you grew exactly like you did this year at each grade level, exactly the same, then you would add 344 students in Judson ISD. Or if we look at what the 3-year average has been, you're looking at the growth the last 3 years, Judson would grow by 282 students. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what the growth patterns could look like. What we've done is we've forecasted growth. You can see here 446 students next year, almost 2% growth. So you can see that we're forecasting faster growth than last year, not a lot faster, but a little bit faster than last year, and certainly faster than the last 3 years. That's because that increase in housing starts, there's you're going to probably start close to 700 homes this year, so you're going to close more homes next year. You're going to get that. We think the kindergarten will bounce back a little bit, and you're going to see 446 change. Now, part of that change also is the fact that you've got the smallest 12th grade class that you've seen in recent history. That class is going to be exited and replaced by a 1,400 student class. So that's a 400 student swing right there. So that kind of keeps your balance going. And if you look at this, then a year from now, what appears to be just a drop in enrollment, 182, the reason that is because your 12th grade class is very similar, but your incoming class, it has not changed either. So you don't have as much of a net change. And a lot of it is based on net up and down change. When these large classes work through, they cause some large changes there. But we think the district could be 24,000 students by 2016, 5-year growth at 1,285 students. You know, within 10 years, we think it'll be at 26,132, almost 3,000 students by 3,000 student growth in about 10 years. And I have this by campus as well. I know it's kind of small and hard to read. You can see that your strong growth is at the elementary level. And right now, if you noticed, I want to point that out too, actually, back here. If you notice that your current kindergarten class is 1,726 students, and your 12th grade is 1,086 students. So you've got almost 700 more students entering than exiting this next year. Now that's going to change a little bit as some of these come forward, but you can see that you're always adding more at the younger level than you have exiting. So that gives you growth even as you're seeing some large declines in the 12th grade. You know, you see those drop-offs, but you're still seeing strong growth because you are going to have your strong elementary level. And I think within 10 years, your kindergarten classes, based on the product of home that's being built, could be close to 2,000 students. If we look at it by campus, you know, we're projected to have 13,175 elementary students in 10 years, you know, and 1,504 new elementary students over this 10-year plan. If we look at the middle and high school, here you can see those things, the growth there as well. You see some negative swings at the high school, and you see it looks kind of flat, the middle school, then it picks up. Again, that's just class sizes move. You're always going to see those ebbs and flows, you know, at your secondary campuses, because those large classes are followed by small classes several years later. And I think with that, just a quick summary. We've got 1,000 vacant developed lots, 6,700 future lots. Third quarter closings rose almost 50% in the district from the previous year. Rolling Hills and Masters elementary zones have the highest rates of new home activity. It's where the most new home activity is. We're projecting 446 students for next year. We can expect 5-year enrollment, like I said, around 1,300 new students and close to 3,000 students in the next 10 years. So I know that's a lot to take in a short amount of time. I'd be happy to take questions.
Are there any questions? Mr. Macias.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. I do have some thoughts that maybe you can elaborate on. One of them was the, I guess, reference to minority population growth and shifts. I've attended some sessions where demographers are stating that you're going to see an expansion of the minority population. In fact, we're already seeing that. Was there a slide, and it was a lot of information, so forgive me if there was, that showed the, I guess, diversity within the district and how that broke down and maybe forecasted for that growth?
We typically do not forecast race or ethnicity, or it wasn't part of our agreement. I shouldn't say we typically don't do it. We did not do it as part of this, of this study. We do have your, I've got a chart. I didn't have it in the presentation, but we have looked at your breakdown, your race and ethnicity breakdown, and it really stayed. The last 2 years, your Hispanic population has been right at 55%. You know, it really, I was surprised to see your percentages stayed very, very consistent. I'm trying to think, you know, I mean, there was just by tenths of a percentage difference in each of those categories. Now, I can certainly send Mr. Kirshner, you know, a copy of a race, ethnicity, or historical chart just to give you a glimpse of that.
And you guys are obviously the experts in this, and we've seen a number of reports, but I just wondered if there was some observation of that. And you did state that you have some of that data, so maybe there's some of that. But that's just obviously a concern. So when we see shifts in population, sometimes you are seeing minority growth populations. So that led to my other question in terms of age demographics. I do notice some of our older communities are now more rental properties are coming, so we're seeing an influx of younger families replacing these older families. And has that also been sort of accounted for?
Yeah, what we do is we do look at the yields by, what we've done is we use appraisal data, and we've found a kind of a different way to do it recently. We look at homestead exemptions. So if you have a homestead exemption or you don't have a homestead exemption. In order to get a homestead exemption, you have to live in the house that you own. So we then take the non-homestead exemption homes and we've mapped your students to each of their points so we can get a yield by homestead and yield by non-homestead. So it's almost like a rental to, just to see, and we've seen some much higher density, much higher yields in your non-homestead housing than in your homestead housing. This is normal because, if you bought your home, you stay in your home longer typically, and so those yields tend to decline faster because as the kids move out, the parents stay, and your rental properties can continually regenerating. We've also looked at over 65 population to see how many students are currently geocoded to an over 65 property that we could make an assumption that it's living with grandparents, it's blended family. Or it's also, what it does for us is we can see where pockets are going to eventually turn over because there's only there's a limited lifespan, I guess, to over 65 population. So we know where your next areas of regeneration can occur too. So we're doing the best we can to account for not only growth through new housing, but growth through regeneration.
And that was forecasted or placed into
the report? It's built into it. It's built into it, yeah. And we could probably get those yields, and if it's interesting to you to see the difference in yields between the the homestead and non-homestead, we can certainly do something.
Well,
like
I just want to make sure that we're looking at that and that there's some sort of observation to that.
It's important for us to understand regeneration in areas that have that kind of housing.
Now, when you say raw land, I'm assuming that's land that can be developed, that has the potential of being utilized for housing. But in some scenarios, like the Evans High School project property, some of that was almost not permitted to be built on because of endangered species and other factors that I can't even list or think of. But is there some data that looks at some of this information that you see as raw land that may never be developed?
I'm sure there certainly is. What we've done is when we look at the futures, that 6,900, 6,800 future lots that we're looking at, that's lots that we know that have already been talked about, that there's development plans out there. And we use that more as a guide to know, okay, there's enough interest that there's enough lot supply that could handle this growth report, these projections. What I can guarantee probably more than anything else is those 6,000 lots that we're going to see in the future won't necessarily come from the ones we know about now. They won't all come from it. What's going to happen is 3 years from now, someone's going to find a spot, find a way to develop that spot, and it's going to beat someone else to market. So what we're doing is we're just trying to say, okay, there's enough. We know that there's enough out there now that we can at least say this growth can happen. Now, in 3 years, it could shift from one pocket to another if some developer can move faster. So it's more from our perspective. We didn't get into what land is never going to be developed and not going, and we didn't need to, because we had the lot supply already out there to sustain the current pace. But we know that there will be areas that, there might be, Abrams Farm with 3,000 lots somewhere. They've already staked it out. It's a future plat that one of the cities has. I made that name up, by the way. It's just an example. But someone else, in Bill's farm, they could come to market. They could show up next year and end up getting their product to market faster, and it could shift where that happens. But the lots are still going to be there. The absorption rate is still going to be there.
Well, and I know that based on some of the data you provided, that we did see an upswing on homes being built near Copperfield, which is where the new elementary school went up. And I naturally would assume that around Evans Road property that we'll see that influx too, where there's new developments. So as we plan future bonds and future strategic plans to figure out where we want to build a school, that's a common practice, right? We're going to see homes just kind of pop up. Sure. In all of those areas. And so your projections kind of outlined that.
As best we can based on what we know now.
Okay.
Yeah. I do think it's a little bit of a moving target when the futures are so high in Judson ISD and the vacant developed lots are fairly low. I mean, really, that it's kind of a constrained market. What they like to say is that a healthy market has a 2-year lot supply. Right now, Judson doesn't have that. It's got about a year and a half at the current pace. So somebody in that 6,900 group needs to deliver lots. It'll likely come from existing developments that already have vacant lots, and they're going to deliver them as they sell them. But that's going to be the challenge to meet this forecast, is if the future lots can all get delivered.
And I just have one more final question. Just in your experience, these lots can be acquired by any entity and be built on. I assume the lots you're talking about, have they already been purchased by?
Chances are the vacant developed lots are already, KB Home already, they've already got builders. The developer already has builders. Now, the platted lots, the future stuff, that might be what's waiting for, that might be what's holding things up, is they're having to get their builders all in place. But typically, these type of developments are not going to be like a bunch of individual builders. They might have, 200 lots might be done by KB Homes, 200 lots by Huff Manning. They might, section those off.
My concern is, based on your experience, could apartment complexes be built on these properties? And if so, do apartment complexes tend to have a higher student population as opposed to residential homes?
No, it is lower, but that would take a zoning change in order for an apartment complex to be built, on any of those properties. I'm not going to say it can't happen.
Yeah.
You might have to look at specific ones, but that would typically have to go through the city and go through a zoning change, and there can be some challenges.
It's not bad. I'm not saying apartments are bad, but certainly just we need to forecast as best as possible.
Right.
And this is such a detailed report.
Their yields are typically smaller unless they're, like I said before, a Section 8, a subsidized apartment complex, and then those yield more than your typical neighborhood would.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
On the comment you just made, are you referring to the futures? The futures, where you have the futures, those lots are already platted?
Those are already,
to the VDOs?
They're already planned.
Already planned.
And there is a difference, because somebody could have a planned development they've taken to a city for 2,000 futures, and they might have a land plan for it, but when they actually get the final plat approved, it may look different than it looks now. It might end up being 800 homes instead of 1,000.
But just the number of homes. So once they have the approved, then they're approved as either single-family residential or apartment complex, so
Sure.
that won't change?
That won't change
Okay.
once that happens. Unless they could come back and petition the city.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Salinas.
Just want to say thank you very much, sir. You've given us several reports throughout the years, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
At this time, we have our attorneys here, and I want to move to item 7, closed session. And we'll go ahead and do everything in closed session that we're going to do. Yes. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074, discussing personnel. B, pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.74, consider and review the job description filling of the position of Executive Director for Human Resources. Item C, pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding approval to initiate contemplated litigation regarding existing facilities less than 10 years old. No decisions will be made in closed session, no votes will be taken, and hopefully we won't be there that long. Thank you. At 7:55.